Picture the map of Europe in the spring of 1941. It is a continent that's just completely convulsing.
Yeah, convulsing is the right word. The smell of burning oil and shattered masonry really seems to just hang over everything.
Exactly. I mean, borders are being violently redrawn. Supposedly, invincible nations are collapsing in a matter of weeks.
Right, and the entire trajectory of human history is balancing on a razor's edge.
It really is. And today, we are stepping into a moment where the world is quite literally holding its breath. We're going to look exclusively at a highly condensed, incredibly volatile window of time.
Just a 60-day window.
Right, exactly 60 days, between May 1st and June 30th, 1941.
It is a phenomenal window to analyze, honestly, because it represents the ultimate pivot point of the entire conflict.
It really does.
We start the month of May looking at the end of major military operations in the Balkans, and in many ways that was a localized regional theater.
A very contained fight, relatively speaking.
Exactly. But by the end of June, the whole board flips. We plunge headfirst into the cataclysmic invasion of the Soviet Union.
The sheer scale of the violence just shifts. It goes from rapid regional campaigns in the West to a true grinding war of global annihilation in the East.
And it happens so fast.
It does. And for you listening, we want to put you right in the middle of this pressure cooker. Imagine being alive during this exact window.
Oh, the anxiety would be palpable.
Palpable. The news on the radio is changing by the hour, and nobody knows what the map will look like tomorrow.
So let's set the scene on the ground.
Yeah, let's start in May 1941, looking at the Mediterranean theater, specifically Greece.
The situation for the Allies there isn't just bad, it is catastrophically dire.
Right. You have roughly 74,000 British and Commonwealth troops who had attempted to hold the line in Greece.
And they were just completely overwhelmed.
Completely. Forced into this desperate, chaotic retreat toward the sea.
And the numbers are grim. Only about 44,000 of those troops actually managed to escape the mainland.
So you have tens of thousands of exhausted, battered soldiers backed against the water.
Scrambling onto literally any vessel that can float.
Right. And a massive portion of those survivors end up on the island of Crete.
Which is fascinating psychologically, because they viewed Crete as a momentary sanctuary.
Like a refueling stop.
Yeah, a desperate support base. The assumption was that the sea would act as a moat against the advancing enemy armor.
Tanks can't swim.
Exactly. They felt safe from the blitzkrieg.
But the sea couldn't protect them from the sky.
No, it couldn't.
Between May 20th and June 1st, a completely new paradigm of warfare descended on those stranded troops. Operation Merkur, or Mercury.
This was a massive, unprecedented airborne assault.
Thousands of paratroopers dropping right on top of the Allied positions.
You really have to put yourself in the shoes of the soldiers on the ground. Seeing an invasion force materialize out of thin air.
It must have felt like a terrifying leap into science fiction.
Absolutely. But the initial phase of that drop was actually a tactical disaster for the invaders.
Really? A disaster.
Oh, yeah. Because the element of surprise evaporates the moment you land in the middle of a hardened, desperate defensive line.
Oh, right. Because the troops on Crete were already dug in.
Exactly. The British and Commonwealth troops on the ground inflicted horrifying casualties on the paratroopers in those first few days.
It was a slaughter initially.
It was, but the strategic turning point was the absolute dominance of the air.
The air support.
Right. The skies belonged to the invading forces, and that constant punishing close air support eventually broke the Allied lines.
Forcing yet another massive, tragic evacuation.
Leaving thousands behind to be captured or killed, and ultimately, Crete falls.
You know, you look at Crete on paper, and it reads like a spectacular, groundbreaking victory, capturing a strategically vital island entirely from the air.
But if you read between the lines of the casualty reports,
It's the textbook definition of a Pyrrhic victory, isn't it?
100%. The loss of life among those highly trained, elite airborne troops was so staggering that it practically paralyzed the high command.
Because elite paratroopers are not easily replaced.
Not at all. They represent a massive investment of time, training, and specialized resources.
So what was the fallout from that?
The bloodbath on Crete was so severe that the high command decided, right then and there, to abandon the concept of massive airborne operations for the future.
Wow. So they win the battle but scrap the tactic entirely.
Exactly. It fundamentally altered how military doctrine would be applied going forward. They permanently grounded a weapon that had just proven it could conquer an island.
That is incredibly ironic.
It really is.
If you are enjoying this video, please watch it until the end. It helps the channel a lot and encourages us to continue our work.
So we have the Mediterranean effectively locked down.
Right, but the tension isn't just localized there. The geopolitical center of gravity violently snaps to the North Atlantic.
Late May 1941.
Yes, defined by the terrifying hunt for the Bismarck.
The naval war at this specific moment is the most critical struggle for sheer survival.
Because Britain is functionally an island under siege.
Entirely. It requires millions of tons of imported food, fuel, and war materials just to maintain a baseline level of resistance.
If those supply lines are cut, the war is over.
In a matter of weeks, the Battle of the Atlantic is a brutal mathematical struggle over tonnage. It is entirely about severing or protecting those vital supply lines.
And the Bismarck was the ultimate apex predator designed for that exact environment.
A massive, heavily armored battleship, built to slip into the open Atlantic and systematically annihilate those slow-moving convoys.
The moment it breaks out into the open ocean, the strategic threat level goes off the charts.
It's a terrifying scenario for the Naval Command.
But on May 27th, after this massive, desperate, and incredibly costly hunt, the British Royal Navy finally manages to intercept and sink the Bismarck.
The relief in London must have been staggering.
You can only imagine. But what's fascinating to me is how far the anxiety had already spread globally.
Right across the ocean.
Exactly. Because on that exact same day, May 27th, United States President Franklin D. Roosevelt takes a very drastic diplomatic step.
He proclaims a state of national emergency.
He does. And he directly cites the grave events unfolding in Europe and Africa.
Because he recognizes that the global situation is deteriorating at a terrifying velocity.
Right. The sinking of one massive ship in the Atlantic and the fall of a Mediterranean island, they are not isolated military trivia.
They are geopolitical tremors.
Tremors that are hitting Washington, D.C. forcefully, pushing the supposedly neutral United States closer and closer to the brink of active involvement.
The illusion of American isolationism is crumbling rapidly in late May.
So the tension is ratcheting up globally. The world is watching this massive military machine conquer everything in its path, seemingly unopposed.
But right at this moment of maximum strategic despair, we see an incredible localized spark of human defiance.
Yes. We have to go back to Greece for a second.
May 31st.
May 31st, just days after the Bismarck sinks while the final brutal mopping-up operations are finishing on Crete. In occupied Athens, two young men do something that carries an unbelievable amount of psychological weight.
Under the cover of darkness, they sneak up to the Acropolis.
The Acropolis.
Yeah.
The literal and metaphorical cradle of Western democracy.
And at that moment, it was flying the Nazi swastika, projecting dominance over the entire occupied city.
And these individuals climb up and tear that flag down,
Surrounded by an occupying army.
knowing full well that if a patrol spots you, it is instant summary execution.
No trial, just death.
And they strip that symbol of occupation right off the skyline.
The psychological impact of that single act cannot be overstated. You are looking at an entire continent completely traumatized by the speed, efficiency, and brutality of the military occupation.
And suddenly, in the heart of Athens, there's this profound, highly visible act of defiance.
It becomes the first truly great symbolic act of the Greek resistance.
It sent an immediate electrifying message that while the physical armies may have been defeated and the territory occupied,
The spirit of the people absolutely was not broken.
it perfectly illustrates that not all battles in 1941 were fought with tanks or planes or battleships.
Sometimes a piece of cloth and a daring climb can strike a massive blow to an occupier's morale.
Absolutely. But speaking of hidden battles, as we roll into June 1941, an entirely invisible war is taking shape.
Ah, yes. The intelligence war.
A war of mathematics, of cryptography, and of sheer mental endurance happening far, far away from any front line.
In June, we see the formal launch and massive escalation of what was known as Project Ultra.
Right. This was the highly classified Allied effort dedicated to breaking the encrypted communications of the Axis powers.
Specifically targeting the high-level German, Japanese, and Italian signals.
And the absolute crown jewel, the Mount Everest of this intelligence effort, was cracking the Enigma machine.
For anyone who thinks Enigma was just a sophisticated decoder ring, the math behind it is pure existential dread.
It really is. It's a cipher device that scrambles messages, but the settings changed constantly.
Every single day. We are talking about an engineering marvel capable of 158 quintillion different settings.
That's 158 million.
Exactly. That staggering number means brute force is entirely off the table.
You could dedicate every single human being on Earth to guessing combinations for a lifetime and you wouldn't crack a single day's radio traffic.
The mathematical permutations are paralyzing.
But they did crack it.
They did. And this is where the analysts at Bletchley Park, driven by minds like Alan Turing, fundamentally changed the trajectory of human technology.
Because they recognized that human cognition couldn't keep pace with the cipher.
Exactly. They needed to build a machine to defeat a machine.
It is the absolute dawn of computational pattern analysis.
It wasn't about guessing the password. It was about inventing the architecture of modern computing out of pure military necessity.
Analyzing the traffic for patterns, right? For predictable human errors.
Yeah, like a radio operator using the same sign-off every morning. They developed electromechanical machines, the bombs, capable of running through those mathematical probabilities at speeds a human simply couldn't match.
And it wasn't just a niggle, was it?
No, not at all. In that same month of June, British operators started picking up signals from the German teleprinter network.
Which used a completely different cipher machine.
Right, the Lorenz machine, which the British codenamed Tunny.
And this was even more complex than Enigma, wasn't it?
Far more complex. Enigma was used by field units, the Navy, the Air Force, but Lorenz was used exclusively for the highest level strategic communications between the high command.
So cracking Tunny was like tapping directly into the brain of the enemy leadership.
Exactly. The strategic edge this provides is almost unfair. By intercepting and deciphering these top-level communications, the Allies are essentially reading the mail of the enemy high command.
They can anticipate submarine movements in the Atlantic.
They can track logistical supply lines, map out order of battle changes.
It acts as an invisible shield that becomes the absolute key to surviving the naval war.
And eventually turning the tide of the entire conflict.
Yet, the most terrifying aspect of June 1941 is that the enemy command didn't know their most secure communications were compromised.
No, they were operating with supreme confidence, completely focused on preparing for an operation so massive, so logistically insane, that it almost defies strategic logic.
Which brings us to mid-June. The diplomatic chessboard is being frantically rearranged for a storm that the rest of the world doesn't quite see coming.
Because when you are planning the largest military operation in the history of warfare, you cannot afford a vulnerable flank.
You have to secure your borders.
You do. And we see this massive flurry of diplomatic activity locking everything down. In May, Japan mediates the end of the Franco-Thai War, securing their influence in Southeast Asia.
Consolidating their power on that side of the globe.
Exactly. And then on June 15th, the newly formed independent state of Croatia formally joins the Tripartite Pact.
Locking down the Balkans.
Right. But the most crucial move happens on June 18th.
The signing of the Turkish-German Treaty of Friendship and Non-Aggression.
Which is officially ratified a week later on June 25th.
Geopolitically, this is a brilliant piece of diplomatic maneuvering, isn't it?
Oh, absolutely. By formally guaranteeing Turkish neutrality, the Axis powers effectively neutralized any potential threat from the southeast.
They didn't have to worry about an allied front opening up through Turkey or the Middle East.
It sealed off the Mediterranean flank, which allowed the high command to concentrate their entire terrifying military apparatus on one single colossal objective.
The East.
The East.
Which brings us to the ultimate tipping point of the 20th century. June 22nd, 1941. Operation Barbarossa.
The sheer violence of tearing up the 1939 Non-Aggression Pact.
Germany, along with Italy and Romania, launches a massive, coordinated attack on the Soviet Union.
The scale of this invasion, it requires a total recalibration of how we understand warfare.
You are looking at an attacking force of over 3.1 million German troops.
But they aren't marching alone.
No, they're joined by roughly 650,000 soldiers from other Axis nations.
You have expeditionary forces from Italy, Romania, Hungary, Slovakia.
Even volunteer divisions from Spain.
Nearly 3.8 million men pouring across a border that stretches from the freezing Baltic Sea in the north all the way down to the Black Sea in the south.
It remains, without a doubt, the largest military operation in human history.
The logistics alone are horrifying to contemplate. Moving 3.8 million men isn't just about handing out rifles.
Right, you have to feed them.
You have to feed them, supply them with millions of horses.
People always forget the horses.
They do. And tens of thousands of tanks and aircraft, mountains of artillery shells, rivers of fuel.
And the friction of the invasion. The changing railway gauges as they cross into Soviet territory.
The muddy roads, the command and control nightmare of coordinating different Allied armies with different languages and doctrines.
It is a level of total mobilization that the world had never seen before.
And hasn't seen since.
The absolute hubris of it is staggering to me. How do you hide an army of 3.8 million men?
You can't. You really can't.
The buildup was massive. The rail networks were jammed for months. There were intelligence reports pouring into Moscow.
And yet, the Soviet leadership was caught completely off guard.
Paralyzed by disbelief.
And on the flip side, the German hubris. The supreme confidence that they could conquer the largest, most punishing landmass on Earth in a matter of a few summer months.
It is a level of strategic arrogance that almost defies belief.
But to understand Barbarossa, you really have to understand the underlying ideology.
Because this was not a traditional military campaign.
Not at all. This wasn't about adjusting a border or securing a few strategic ports for trade.
This wasn't a gentleman's war with rules of engagement like they experienced in Western Europe.
Far from it. This was explicitly designed as an ideological war of total annihilation.
The directives given to the invading forces made it abundantly clear that the traditional rules of war, the Geneva Conventions, the concepts of chivalry, none of it applied in the East.
None of it. The stated goal was the complete destruction of a political system and the deliberate industrialized targeting of tens of millions of civilians.
For extermination, enslavement, and starvation.
Just to secure so-called living space. It was a military campaign driven by pure, unfiltered racial and political hatred.
And the immediate geopolitical fallout of that invasion is utterly chaotic.
It really is.
As June draws to a close, it's like a spark hitting a global powder keg. The conflict violently widens in every direction.
Almost immediately.
On June 24th, just 2 days after the first tanks crossed the border, Bulgarian communists initiated an armed resistance.
They viewed the unprovoked attack on the Soviets as the absolute final straw for action.
The domino effect is incredibly rapid. Just 2 days after that, on June 26th, the Northern Front erupts,
Finland officially declares war on the Soviet Union,
initiating what is known as the Continuation War.
which is a brutal freezing front in the far north.
Because the Finns had lost significant territory to the Soviets in the Winter War just over a year prior.
And they clearly saw this massive German invasion as the perfect strategic opportunity to reclaim those lost lands.
Exactly. And while the world is entirely consumed by the staggering violence unfolding across the Soviet frontier, other actors see a chance to make their moves.
Always. On June 29th, Mussolini issues a decree creating a Greater Albania.
It is almost darkly comedic.
It is. Mussolini treating the largest, most violent global conflict in human history like an opportune moment for a geopolitical side quest.
Expanding territorial claims in the Balkans while millions of men are clashing in the East. It just further muddies the waters of an already chaotic theater.
If we step back and look at the global board as June 1941 bleeds into July, the strategic reality is incredibly stark.
The era of swift, isolated, lightning-fast victories in the West is officially dead and buried.
By tearing up the Non-Aggression Pact and plunging headfirst into the vast, unforgiving depths of the Soviet Union, the Axis powers had fundamentally and permanently changed the nature of the conflict.
They had locked themselves into a grinding, existential, two-front war from which there was no diplomatic exit. It is genuinely exhausting just recounting the sheer density of these 60 days. You start May with the frantic, tragic evacuation of Greece and the unprecedented, bloody paratrooper assault on Crete.
You have the terrifying high-stakes hunt for the Bismarck in the Atlantic, pushing the United States to declare a national emergency.
You have two young men scaling the Acropolis in the dead of night to tear down a symbol of oppression.
While in a quiet English countryside, mathematicians are unlocking the secrets of 158 quintillion permutations, breaking the unbreakable codes of Enigma and Lorentz.
And then the Earth literally shakes with the footsteps of almost 4 million men launching a war of annihilation into the Soviet Union.
Between May 1st and June 30th of 1941, the old world was fundamentally broken, and a terrifying new reality was remade in its place.
The density of history in that window is just unmatched.
Unmatched. And I want to leave you with a final thought to mull over as we conclude. Consider the collective mindset of the Axis leadership in May 1941. They had swept across Western Europe with a speed that terrified the globe.
They had achieved lightning-fast victories that dismantled established empires in weeks.
But how much did the sheer hubris of those easy victories blind them to the impossible, punishing realities of the East? At what exact moment does overwhelming military confidence transform into a fatal, civilization-ending strategic flaw? Because in those 60 days, driven by their own perceived invincibility, they made a decision that irrevocably sealed their ultimate fate.
If you enjoyed the video, please subscribe to the channel, Activate the notification bell to be notified about new videos. Click the like button and share the video with your colleagues, as this helps us maintain the channel. Thank you.